the mission and the sole focus and purpose of the selection committee is to rank the 4 very best teams in college football for inclusion into the playoff. We've analyzed, we've gone inside this data in detail, and we've looked at teams side by side. Yes, we put those teams side by side in comparison, but right now, as our rankings show this week, the selection committee believes as of this week that Ohio State is number 2 and that Penn State is still sitting in that 7th spot.
That seems stressful. Well, you heard him. The College Football Playoff Committee has the seemingly impossible task of trying to pick the top 4 teams each week. And this is what we've got with just one more week until the final rankings are released. So let's get you caught up on who's in right at this moment. The outcome of the game, Ohio State-Michigan, had a major impact on the College Football Playoff picture. The double overtime loss by the Wolverines became Washington's gain as the Huskies moved into the number 4 spot. Bama continues its stranglehold of the number 1 spot as it has for each of the last 5 weeks. Following the Tide are Ohio State and Clemson. Michigan, previously in the 3rd spot, dropped to 5th. Now, according to 538.com, Alabama and Ohio State have a 92% chance to make the playoff. Michigan just a 1% chance, and Penn State a 21% chance. And to help us break it all down, Trevor Maddich in the house, our friend. Good to see you as always.
Good morning.
What's up, man? How are you?
Great.
Good to see you. Let's roll.
I want to start with Max here.
Yes, we just had a lively debate about this in the makeup room.
Well, we're about to have it here, too.
What's makeup?
Yes, shocking.
I thought you were a natural beauty, but you've been exposed. What's your biggest issue with the rankings?
I don't have an issue with the rankings. I like the rankings. I think that people who complain about Ohio State because of a loss in the conference, so they won't be in the conference championship game, you want to try to kind of protect the sanctity and the importance of the tradition of the conferences. I appreciate that, but you also wanted a playoff system, and I think those 2 ideas are mutually exclusive. The playoff system necessarily devalues the conferences. That's 1. 2, Clemson's got one weird loss therein. And by the way, Ohio State looks, other than Alabama, they're in their own category, maybe the best team in the country other than Alabama. They got to be there. Alabama's got to be there. Clemson's got to be there. They've been terrific. And when it comes to the 4th team, if you're looking for tiebreakers, I think the Pac-12 should be represented. I think if it's possible and you're looking for something, have the various major conferences, the power conferences, represented. And there is an East Coast bias against the West Coast, mainly based on the fact that the games start late and stuff. They just don't see it as much. So I'd like to see Washington in. I think they are deserving, at least as much as anyone else. I like the top 4.
Well, I appreciate you coming around to Washington, because Lord knows you fought me enough on that one when I kept talking about Washington for weeks.
Untrue.
But yes, it is true until they got smacked around.
You know this video's recorded,
by
right?
USA, of course. By USC. They got smacked around by USC. That really was a turn off for me. I can understand. So in theory, I don't want to say definitively, like, outspoken about having a problem with the top 4, Trevor. My issue is the Ohio State situation. Not only did you lose to Penn State, you looked suspect against Northwestern. You looked suspect against Michigan State. And that same Penn State team annihilated Michigan State. Now, they also got annihilated by Michigan. You beat Michigan. And when you got a loss on your record that's at 49-10, that doesn't look good when you're considered one of the top 4 teams in America. And so because of that, I sort of understand it. There's just something, for Ohio State, they're the only ones. I'm not suspect about Alabama. I'm not suspect about Clemson. I would prefer to see Michigan in there instead of Washington, even though I've spent a lot of time giving Washington its props and it only has 1 loss to the USC. But where it really resonates with me in terms of being a lot of trepidation is with Ohio State. Lost to Penn State, sloppy against Michigan State, sloppy against Northwestern. I just look at that. And you know, the game against Michigan, they came back, no doubt, those first 3 quarters. They didn't look that impressive. The greatest argument that I can make on behalf of Ohio State is this. If you want somebody to compete against Nick Saban, you want it to be Urban Meyer. That's about the best argument I can make for Ohio State.
That's fair. Now, the thing is, the current ranking, I'm okay with, because we don't have conference championships factored in. They haven't happened yet.
Right.
What worries me is the way the committee is speaking right now through their spokespeople. And that is saying that Penn State is way behind Ohio State and talking in such a way that they may well put in Ohio State over Penn State without putting Penn State in. So if that happens, and assuming that Penn State wins the Big Ten championship, the committee can't look forward, but we can. If Penn State wins the Big Ten, then they will have beaten Ohio State head-to-head. They will have won the division Ohio State is in. They will win the conference that Ohio State is in. And if the committee puts them in, Ohio State now, in over Penn State, then what they will have done is marginalize what has made college football great for the last 100 years. Who wins the conference matters. Who wins head-to-head matters. And the committee will say that those things are merely minor occurrences to be applied as tiebreakers only if they can't separate teams in other ways. And if they do that, it would do tremendous damage to college football.
I have a couple questions about that. First of all, what I liked about college football before the playoff system was it was a de facto, at best, double elimination regular season playoff tournament, really. Couldn't have two losses, sometimes couldn't have one, and that heightened everything. And so with a playoff, that is diminished somewhat. There's no way around that.
Sure.
But my question to you is, okay, if your argument is Penn State should go if they belong there,
If they win the championship.
Fine. If they win the championship and they go, fine. If your argument is because they beat Ohio State head-to-head, in other words, if Penn State wasn't in the same conference as Ohio State, then you'd be okay with Ohio State going to the Final Four, basically, to the playoff. But simply because of this quirk where they're in the same conference, that eliminates Ohio State if Penn State doesn't deserve to go?
I would suggest that quirk is a different word that I would use. I would suggest the reality that they're in the same conference. And therefore, you've got to compare them head-to-head, because if only one team comes out of the Big Ten, you've got to decide between those two, not if Penn State were in a different conference.
So are you saying Penn State... Okay, this is what I need to know from you, Trevor. If Penn State wins the Big Ten championship,
yes,
do they belong in the playoff? Because if the answer is yes, then I'm okay with you saying that. But if you say no, they still don't, and therefore that eliminates Ohio State, that is paradoxical to me.
Well, paradoxical it may be, but if Penn State wins the Big Ten...
First of all, y'all need to explain what paradoxical means to most of America.
It's kind of like...
Yeah.
I'm
just
saying.
It
means if the statement is true, then it can't be true.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, it's true, and it remains true for this reason. If Penn State wins the Big Ten, I'm not saying that they should be in the playoff because there are other teams in other conferences. I'm saying that they should be in the playoff if Ohio State is in the playoff. I'm saying that it would be okay to put Penn State in. It would be okay to put both Penn State and Ohio State in. It would not be okay to put Ohio State in and leave Penn State behind if they have over Ohio State head-to-head, won their division,
then what you're
won their
saying,
conference with similar records and similar strength of schedule.
Then what you're saying, the reason I can't process that is what you're saying is your insistence on retaining the kind of integrity of the importance of conference
How
play.
horrible is that? That's terrible.
Why don't you think that conference championships matter?
They don't anymore. It's not like they used to. I agree they should, but the reality is they don't. Because what you're saying is if Penn State, in your opinion, doesn't deserve to go, then even if Ohio State does, they can't go because you won't put Penn State in.
You got it. That's exactly right.
Let me go.
I feel like Abbott and Costello. Who's on first?
Penn State's on first.
We got it. But let me ask you this question. A couple of years back, TCU was number 3.
Yes.
Ohio State was number 6.
Okay.
TCU had won the last game of the regular season, so did Ohio State. Ohio State somehow leapfrogged above them.
Yes.
Them and Baylor were on the outside looking in. There was no explanation for that by the committee. Last year, Ohio State lost a game, okay? Oklahoma lost, but they lost a 7-5 West Virginia team, but somehow they were put in there, but Ohio State wasn't put in there. 2011, Alabama lost to LSU 9-6, but they still played LSU in a national championship game because somehow, some way, despite the loss, they were still put up there. So what I'm saying to you is that you've got situations where conference champions weren't necessarily put into the mix to compete for a national championship. So why was it not a big deal to you then, but it's a big deal to you with Penn State now?
It was a big deal to me. I hated it that Alabama was put in the BCS championship game because that LSU matchup was the game of the century in college football. A huge buildup, a massive emotional payoff, positive or devastating, depending on what side you were on. And it was an epic shift in the balance of power in the national championship picture until it wasn't. Until somebody said, oh, never mind, that was just an exhibition, we'll have a do-over.
Okay,
now,
so here's the question. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, just to say this, those two teams finished with very similar resumes. Penn State would have one more loss than Ohio State, just one. Ohio State would have one more win over a team likely will finish in the top 10, just one. But Penn State will have head-to-head in conference championship, but you've got to decide which one's more important. I'm saying that the committee would do damage to college football by using head-to-head and conference championship as a mere razor to split hairs at the end of the process.
So put Penn State in the playoffs at whose expense?
Ohio State's. If you're not going to bring both.
Okay, see, here's my issue. Trevor, do you want a playoff?
Yes.
I think those two ideas, the playoff on the one hand and the retaining of the importance of the conference championship and the kind of tournament-style regular season, I think those are mutually exclusive. I think if you have the one, you're devaluing the other.
Now, this is the first thing I wrote down when you spoke at the beginning. Smart stuff. I disagree with it, though. You said that the conference championship importance and the playoff are mutually exclusive. I agree with you that the 14 playoff diminishes to a degree the conference championships because they're not absolute anymore. I get that. But I think you've got to be very careful to not diminish it so far that you make them irrelevant. And that's what I fear the committee will do if we get to this hypothetical scenario. And the way they're talking, they're heading in that direction. And so the cure could be worse than the disease if you take conferences and you diminish those conference races on a national level. That's one of the things that's made college football what it's been for the last century.
Well, that is a very well-reasoned position, which is why we wanted you on today, Trevor.
Trevor Mattis, dropping knowledge, as always. So good to see you.
Thank you,
Thank you for being with us.
2001, Nebraska. What didn't they lose? They gave up 62 points one game in 2001. Somebody reminded me of that?
I wasn't born yet. In
2001?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very young.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
They lost the last game to Colorado. I'm looking at it
Genius,
right here.
baby.
November 23rd, 2001. They lost to Colorado last game, 62-36. And still, the committee robbed Colorado when they would be playing in that national championship game. And Nebraska went up against Miami in the Rose Bowl and lost 37-14.
But see, you've got the poll system back then and the BCS system. Now what you've got is a committee that has conflicting criteria within itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what's scary because what precedent they're going to set and then opening Pandora's box.
Inconsistency,
yeah, exactly.
but that's exactly what the NCAA wants because they get our attention, because they got us talking about them. That's what they want.
That's the other stuff. This is the good stuff about college football.
Right.
This is one of the things that makes it awesome. This stuff.
Okay.
Is that a real beard?
It is real. What is
Because I saw you in makeup, and I don't know if they applied the beard.
Real?
They just put makeup on.
Trevor, thank you so much for being with us.
First Take is brought to you by Subway Restaurants and Cricket Wireless, something to smile about.
Ezekiel Elliott is averaging over 22 carries per game through his first 11 games of his NFL career. Some might think that is a heavy workload, but Jerry Jones said on 105.3 The Fan yesterday that the more we can give Ezekiel the ball, the better. Clearly no plan to slow him down. Stephen A., how do you feel about this?
I think that Ezekiel Elliott should be careful. Don't trust him. DeMarco Murray ran the ball, 292 times, touched the ball another 57 times. They ran him into the ground and then sent them out like yesterday's trash. This is what they do to running backs in the NFL. It's nice that he looks great now, but be careful. You got a long career.
We ask players in the NFL to make irrational decisions about their long-term future, to sacrifice for the present. That's what's being asked of Ezekiel Elliott. However, they got a chance to win a Super Bowl. This is what you signed up for. Keep doing what you're doing.
Hey, if Dak is so great, let him do some of that workload so Zeke doesn't have to. Alfred Morris can run too, and we brag about the offensive line. You don't have to run him into the ground.
Keep it. However they got it going now, they should keep it that way.
See y'all tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks for hanging with us.